What things are misrepresented or overemphasized in movies because if they were depicted realistically they just wouldn't work on film? Comas. Source: when I was a teenager I was in a coma for several days. 1. The way the tubes, ventilator, feeding tube, etc. are taped to your face body is not the same way Hollywood does it. 2. A patient in a coma is not, necessarily, totally motionless. Just because they are moving doesn't mean they are awake. 3. Waking up, I did not yawn, stretch, and remark on how well rested I felt. From what I've been told, the first sign of me being awake had something to do with the heart monitor. 4. It took months of rehab for me to resume anything resembling a normal life, and I was only out for 11 days. There's a loose correlation between the length of coma and length of rehab. More time in a coma equals more time in rehab. And by normal life I mean able to leave the house without a walker or cane, not able to outthink and outmuscle a bunch of bad guys. The amount of paperwork and investigations after a car chase or police shooting. Bad Boys Lethal Weapon would have been the first scene and then months of admin work investigations. You don't kill 7 people in a gunfight and go back to work as normals the next hour. I loved the joke in Mass Effect 3 where a character gets shot and freaks out about it and won't stop talking about it and goes a bit loopy from pain meds. Commander Shepard gives them tips on how to deal with everything and do the paperwork and the victim says that maybe Shepard gets shot at too often. Shepard replies that it's easier if you make a template. Criminal court trials can be very, very dull. Even the murders. Everyone knows everything beforehand. I've been doing this 20 years and never has a defendant been broken down by the prosecutor and made a dramatic confession on the stand. Only once has a cop come through with a missing piece of evidence that exonerated the defendant on the morning of trial. It was security camera footage misplaced in evidence. There's a lot of paperwork and report reading and less going out onto the gritty streets to interview witnesses. I've never been shot at, never been intimidated by the mob or threatened by a Mexican drug cartel. No high-speed chases. Lab results take weeks and I've never gone down to the lab. The lab is in a different county and I only ever talk to those guys on the phone or by email. Lawyers. Most of the job is research and they're not always in court doing cross-examination with controversial questions and soapbox closing arguments. Same with TV lawyer shows. No lawyer can actually be like Alan Shaw. Client comes in with dramatic story. Next scene, trial, with hundreds of people in the gallery, of course. Law firms are boring places to work. Lawyers are not slick actors like they are on Suits or other TV shows, movies. Research, oh, and we need 3 copies of all these research. When somebody is watching video footage and they're at the wrong part, they press fast forward for 3 seconds, and press play at exactly the right part. Similarly, when someone is told to turn on the news, it's always at exactly the start of the segment with all the relevant details. Never in the middle, like would actually happen 100% of the time. Protagonist. How long will it take to get this lab result? Technician. 10 hours. Protagonist. You have 5 minutes. Technician. Fine with me. Technician 5 minutes later. Frick that guy. How amnesia works. It's not like you always get bonked on the head and forget everything about your life up until that moment. Was going to say this one. I never thought Did Live the husband gets amnesia and forgets who you are storyline, but I have. It's not like movies, it's worse. Memories shape personality. A physical encounter always happens on the kitchen counter and lasts 11 seconds. Lasts 11 seconds. So true. 3 times as long as it takes me as a matter of fact. Helicopter crashes. In movies, video games, you spin out of control. I roll if the tail rotor stops working or the engine fails or something, then you can use auto rotation to land safely. This is something that pilots are required to learn and demonstrate. Shoot a car with a pistol and it freaking explodes. Man. Or the opposite, open the car door and suddenly it becomes a bulletproof shield. Salaries are always way higher than reality. Carrie Bradshaw is the best example. She writes a tiny column once a week and can afford 1,500 shoes and a decent apartment in New York City. In reality, she would be living with her parents in New Jersey. Same with any show set in New York City, Friends, etc. Dialogue. There are so many what was I saying? Movies would be so boring with realistic conversations. That's something I always notice they do well in Shaun of the Dead. Very natural dialogue, lots of mumbling, umming and half-finished sentences and the like. The effectiveness of a silencer on a gun. You downgrade from gunshot to clapping two cinder bricks together. There are a ton of ugly, regular people in British television. Made me realize that American movies and TV only show the top 5% of attractive people. I kinda like that about British TV. The ordinarity helps suspend disbelief. Wanna go for a bite to eat? Yeah, cool, I'll pick you up later. But, when, where, you need more details. When are you eating? A movie about me and my co-workers going to lunch would be 3 hours of everyone sitting at the end of the parking lot in my boss's car trying to decide where to go and no one wanting to make a suggestion. Sword fights. They always aim for the blades and not the other person. Sure, hitting the blade to knock it away and follow up with a strike to the body is effective and you do see it in fencing, but they don't do that. They always only try to disarm the opponent, and luckily the opponent also does that, otherwise they'd probably be screwed. In the movies, when the hero is outnumbered 50-1, the bad guys attack one at a time, giving the hero a chance to fight their way out of a terribly mismatched situation unscathed. In real life, while the hero is engaged with 1 or 2 attackers, he is killed by one of the remaining 48 or 49 others. Sometimes people are just really bad at fighting. I remember a video of a boxer who took out like 4 or 5 people by just walking backwards while they could only rush him one at a time because they didn't wait to surround him properly. Computer hacking. It's actually a rather boring, convoluted process and not just a 5 seconds and in kinda thing. Video games also make hacking out to be way cooler than it is. Furious typing, eyes darting between 3 different screens. I'm in. Actors always brush their teeth by jamming a dry toothbrush into their mouths, because toothpaste foam looks stupid on film, I guess. When I was a kid, I thought I was doing something horribly wrong cause I foamed up like a rabid dog. Landmines. They don't click and then only explode after taking the pressure off the plate. They just explode. No warning at all. Going into labor, giving birth. Rarely as dramatic as the movies. And they always just pretty much skip to the birth after that first contraction because no time for an 8-hour labor process in a movie. Opiate addiction. The vast majority of addicts appear to be normal people who get the flu a lot and spend a lot of time in the bathroom. People with autism. There are way fewer savants than you would think based on media representation, because nobody wants to watch a movie about a screaming kid. Louis Theroux has a really good documentary on what real autism looks like and how it affects families, etc. if you're into that sort of thing. Common freaking sense. It's so absolutely frustrating when fake drama happens because 2 protagonists fail to do something like text each other or just brain vomit out a sentence to be misconstrued. I slept with your sister last night. Slap, how could you? I mean, she let me sleep on the couch because I got locked out of my apartment. Just give me a chance to explain. It'll take 5 seconds. I know. High school students who look like freaking supermodels in their mid-20s. And nobody in high school has acne except maybe one kid who is also the school geek. Pretty much everything to do with firearms and explosions. My least favorite is how Newton's laws of motion go right out the window when someone fires a shotgun. Why did the guy who got shot go flying across the room, but the guy who fired it stood still? In the course of threatening this guy, I've cycled the action on this gun 14 times. Also, every time I raise or lower it, it makes a series of clicks and rattles. CPR defibrillators will bring a person back to life and then they're able to get up like nothing ever happened. In reality, they're just used to keep the person alive until they get to the hospital. Events that always led the main character to the point of interest. Not to mention they will not hold up a full-grown adult, much less fit one, unless it was a beefy industrial system. How quickly people get knocked out or how long they stay knocked out for. Some people are more prone to getting knocked out in less hits, but watch boxing or UFC. They take hits all day long and in some fights nobody gets knocked out, just beaten up. Our hero versus a huge thug. Huge thug gets knocked the frick out every time. A server instantly shows up when the main character takes a seat in a restaurant. Pretty much anything gun related. Some people have mentioned the blowback from getting hit with a shotgun or the effectiveness of suppressors, but really it's the loudness for me. When the bad guys and good guys are firing fully automatic rifles in a parking garage and their ears aren't bleeding. No man. Guns are freaking loud. It's almost shocking how loud they are the first time you are around them. Even using a suppressor on a small caliber gun like a 10-stroke 22.22 caliber, it is still recommended you wear hearing protection. I enjoy that Archer, a goofy TV show, address this. When someone speaks into a microphone, the first word is always followed by feedback. They then step away and everything is fine without anyone doing anything. Feedback in those situations is very unlikely to happen unless the mic is being pointed directly into the loudspeaker. Feedback also goes on forever unless someone cuts it out electronically. Mornings. No, I don't wake up to a fully home-cooked breakfast of eggs and pancakes every day. All my shirts aren't ironed to a pristine level and ready to go. My beautiful wife isn't wearing one of my shirts and just underwear squeezing orange juice every day. I guess waking up, hitting snooze 14 times and ironing your shirt just enough to not get fired and struggling out of the door don't make glamorous cinema. Actually, I guess you do see this when the protagonist has the down and depressed period of his life and the filter goes grey. Except in reality that's most people's mornings. I was a huge fan of ironing just the front, then wearing a blazer. Showing up at your crush's house unannounced to express your love. That's a good way to get a restraining order. Computers don't beep during every function, but in movies they do. Seriously, anyone who works with computers would spend time figuring out how to turn that crap off. Injuries and deaths in movies are constantly changed into something that works for the story. Terrible injuries are shown to be no big deal and hassles and light wounds are shown to be fatal. For example, 1. Getting knocked out and waking up hours later. In real life this is a one-way ticket to brain damage town. Even being knocked out for a few seconds it's a big freaking deal. 2. Neck breaking equals instant death. This only happens sometimes. Most of the time breaking your neck just gives you quadriplegia. So most of the goons that Arnold disposes of wouldn't be dead. They'd just be laying on the ground, alive, in agony, but paralyzed. 3. Dying instantly when shot by an arrow. The only way an arrow could kill you instantly is if it hit you in very specific parts of your body like your brainstem, your carotid artery or maybe your big veins in the neck and upper thigh. Arrows to the chest would just incapacitate you and maybe kill you 2 weeks later when the wounds get infected. 4. Explosions. Movies show people surviving explosions a few feet from them all the time. In reality explosions kill people all the time who look completely unburnt and intact. The shockwaves disrupt their organs fatally. 5. Punching a face. Faces are thin muscles stretched over rock hard bone. Punching a face is like punching a wall. When I did a rotations I would treat broken knuckles and fingers from fights as often as broken noses and jaws. Balls out, no limits. Punching fight would last about 4 minutes before both people had to stop in agony because their hands are broken. This was all very interesting to read. Thanks for taking the time. Basically all sound effects in any movie ever. If we were to actually use accurate representations of sound, basically every movie would be terrible, and just people jumping around in costumes instead of actually, acting. Eagles are a good example of that. Eagle sounds are actually Red Hawk sounds usually if memory serves. Actual eagles just sound like giant seagulls. Getting shot in the head. In real life our blood pressure is so strong. Blood flows out of your head like a water hose on high. It's really fricked up. Lines of ancient warriors smashing into one another. People are reluctant to charge into a mass of spears. So many movies and shows have the trope of cutting the palm of your hand when blood is needed for some sort of ritual. It originated because it was an easy place for them to hide a blood packet back when special effects weren't what they are today. However, if you've ever had a cut on the palm of your hand you would know that's a terrible place to make a wound because you pretty much lose the use of that hand and it can take a while to heal. There are much better places to draw blood from yet we still see it all the time and the characters are fine in the scenes after or in the case of shows like Supernatural, they are making fists and fighting with no problem. Much more practical to just pick your nose really hard. Breaking glass bottles is a lot harder than it looks. Also, passing out is overly dramatic. It doesn't usually last long enough for you to wake up in the hospital hours later. Usually if it's from something health related, it might only be less than a minute. There is a video I saw online of some hooligans at a party and one guy tried to break a beer bottle over his own head. It worked, but then the blood started pouring out of his scalp. Another video had a guy hit another one with a wine bottle and the dude just goes down, easily knocked out or killed. And of course the wine bottle was still intact, with some blood on the bottom. Tasers and stun guns. They don't just knock people unconscious, but that's how they always work in movies. Can we have the room, please? Or excuse us for a minute, and a large group of people clears the room so two can talk privately. I have never seen that happen in real life. No breaks, no food, no bathroom, just boundless energy from the characters. I guess losing energy is boring to watch. I think it can be done right. Explosions. Anyone flying a helicopter with dramatic and aggressive yanks and pulls on the cyclic, rotor pitch left and right movement, and the collective. These controls take subtle and small movements to enable the helicopter to respond. Not what you see in movies. You could probably do it once. Car crashes. Usually the car does not blow up. Usually they don't roll multiple times. What they don't often show, which does happen, is people without seatbelts being ejected from the vehicle and flying through the air. It's kind of absurd looking. Some might laugh at first, but then mostly the people die. Much better to show the dead person arranged dramatically but in place inside the car, with tasteful blood and no body parts shattered or torn off. You have been visited by the comfortable garlic bread of good back support. Subscribe to Updoot Reddit in 3 weeks or never sit comfortably again. You have a lot of time for this one. I understand if you're busy, no rush. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.